Welcome to the Bill Moran Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill Moran Show is underwritten by Recovery Works of Maryville, Indiana. And now, here is your host, Bill Moran.
Welcome to the Bill Moran Show. This is Bill Moran welcoming you on this lovely day we're having today. Today is kind of a special day for me. We have with us today Susan Scully, who is the daughter of Dr. John Scully, and the wife of Dr. John Scully, Joan. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much.
I can't tell you, and if you can, just aim that microphone towards her a little bit. There you go. And if you can, just talk in about 6 inches away or so, and I'll try to let you know if we can't hear you. So this is a very special moment for me because Dr. John Scully was our family physician. And I've told this story to many people. You wouldn't be hearing me today if it were not for Dr. John Scully. So it's going to be an emotional show for me. And I can't tell you, ladies, how honored I am to have you here and to allow me to at least help tell the story of this man's life is just very honorable. I feel blessed to do so. So we're going to try to work our way through it, and hopefully Kelly's going to keep us with the levity coming so I don't break out in tears. So again, welcome. And what we are going to do is talk a little bit about our programming before we get in to Kelly's rants. But basically, this week, of course, we have this show. We want to remind people, Recovery Radio is immediately following us at noon. And then we are going to roll into another program. Again, we've joint ventured with Megan Johnston and Recovery Connection to produce a show called Recovery Radio. So she'll be on right after us. In fact, she's here right now. She's she's going to help us out wherever she can. And then, of course, we're going to turn over the reins to her at noon. And today, Megan, do you want to tell us who you have on the show today?
Yeah, today we are going to be having Todd Willis on the show. Todd is the Director of Prevention and Education at Porter Stark Services, and he's going to talk a lot about prevention, what prevention is, what prevention entails, why is it important, and some common myths about prevention. So stay tuned.
Great, and we'll be here again for that. Kelly and I will, of course, this is kind of like a three-headed host that you have between the two shows. So good luck with that, folks listening in at home. So, and then, of course, what you've all tuned in for is Kelly's Rant and Raves. I got it right. Rants and raves. So, Kelly, if you'll share with us what your interests are for the week.
For my rants and raves. All right. Well, first of all, ATMs. Who designed these? You have to have mega gorilla arms or something. You pull up, you can't reach any of the buttons. It's horrible. And then they need to have a little hand sanitizer dispenser right next to it because goodness knows who all's been touching it, and with the flu season and everything, ooh, yuck, ugh. Hot and spicy cinnamon Oreo cookies. Really? That's a thing? We were at the grocery store, and that's the special flavor of Oreos right now. Hot and spicy cinnamon Oreos. Ew. This is sort of a rant and a rave combined. We take US 30 from Highland to get here. US 30 in Lake County. Boo. US 30 in Porter County. Yay! US 30 in Lake County, cars off the road because of ice everywhere. Porter County, less traveled, no cars off the roads, even the little side roads. Perfect. So, yay Porter County, boo Lake County. I used to play with Barbies a lot growing up, and I just found out that there's a reason why my Barbie always dated G.I. Joe. Ken has some issues. Ken now comes with a man bun. Seriously, as of 2017, a man bun? Now, I'm not anti-man buns. I've seen a few gentlemen that actually look kind of sexy and cute with their little man buns, but that's maybe 0.99% of the population. And I can tell you right now, Ken is not in that 0.99% of the population. Ken with a man bun, again, what were you thinking? Mattel, get your act together. Barbie's going to be dating a lot of G.I. Joes and no Kens if this continues to go on. Also, why is it that I can go to Target and Aldi and get a big thing of cashews for $13.99, but I go to GFS, which is supposed to be a bulk kind of store where you can get things cheaper, and the cashews are $21? Really? What's up with that? But now back to the nice raves. I would like to thank the gentleman at the corner of Homan and Ridge Road who let me know the other day in the evening that my back lights were out, because I was able to get in and get that fixed before I got a ticket. So whoever you were, if you're listening, thank you so very much. And also a big shout out to the Highland Police Department, because we had to call them at 2:40 in the morning the other day because there was somebody peeking in our windows and also going across the street and peeking in people's windows. And we called, and seriously, they were there so quickly that we went into the kitchen, and I thought this person was in the backyard because we saw flashlights, but it was actually the police were already there checking things out. So
Wow.
Yay to the Highland
within
Police
minutes.
Department. And so that is my rants and raves for this week. Thanks, everybody.
Well, Kelly, thank you for that. And again, I wish that people would think about me periodically, because I hear about these when they happen. When they come to her thought process, I hear about them immediately. And of course, because the FCC, we have to edit some of Kelly's comments.
That's why you can't record me in the car when we're driving.
Yes, because I'm sure that they would shut down this station. Again, I've told you folks before, not the kind, sweet person with the big smile in the car. It doesn't happen in the car.
I'm a nice person until I get behind the wheel.
Well, Kelly, now
I'm
that you
surrounded
have,
by morons,
you've
so
got the microphone warmed up. Kelly, because she's a lot better reader than I, and I wanted to make sure that this is done justice, we're going to hear a bit about Dr. John Scully from the beginning of his life to and everything that he was involved with from his career and so on. So Kelly is going to take you through Dr. Scully's bio. So with that, Kelly, please do us the honor.
Universally admired for his tremendous devotion to the practice of medicine, compassion for his patients, and dedication to teaching and mentoring of physicians and nurses, Dr. Scully gave his entire professional life to the people of Northwest Indiana. Self-described as the luckiest man in the world for having met and married his wife of 60 years, Joan Carroll, Dr. Scully was keenly devoted to and incredibly loved by Joan. At the time of their initial meeting, Joan was the chief medical technologist, where Dr. Scully was a medical resident in training. He gained her attention by constantly ordering stat procedures at night. That was the last time he gave her an order. Together, they created a loving and wonderful family filled with 4 children and 8 grandchildren who dearly miss him. Born on March 10, 1924 at Mercy Hospital in Gary, Dr. Scully attended Holy Angels Grade School and graduated from Horace Mann High School. After beginning undergraduate studies at Indiana University and establishing deep friendships in the Sigma Alpha Epsilon fraternity, Dr. Scully volunteered for the U.S. Army and honorably served the country during World War II as a lieutenant in the Army Medical Administrative Corps. Following additional training and education at the Citadel during the war, Dr. Scully completed his undergraduate studies and medical school at the University of Maryland with the assistance of the GI Bill. Receiving his doctorate of medicine in 1951, Dr. Scully was a member of the Rush Medical Honorary. Completing his residency in internal medicine at the Youngstown Hospital Association, where he served as chief resident, Dr. Scully then became certified as a specialist in internal medicine by the American Board of Internal Medicine. Dr. Scully practiced medicine in Lake County for almost 5 decades and cared for thousands of Northwest Indiana residents. Upon his retirement in 2000, St. Mary Hospital named its intensive care unit the John T. Scully ICU. Dr. Scully had served as the medical director of that ICU for 27 years. He also served the St. Mary's community as chairman of the Department of Medicine, as chairman of the Executive Committee of the Medical Staff, director of the Cardiodiagnostic Division of the hospital, chairman of the Institutional Review Board overseeing research projects at the hospital, and chairman of the Critical Care Committee for many years. Dr. Scully was a founding partner of Internal Medicine Associates. He taught for many years at the medical school located at IU Northwest. Dr. Scully also served on the medical staffs of St. Anthony of Crown Point, Methodist Hospital, and St. Mary's Medical Center of Hobart, Indiana. At Methodist Hospital, he served as chairman of the Department of Medicine and as a member of the Executive Council. Dr. Scully served on the board of directors of the Lakeshore Hospital Systems, overseeing St. Mary's and St. Catherine's. He was a member of the Lake County Medical Society, Indiana State Medical Association, and the American College of Physicians. He was also a life member of the Elm Society of the University of Maryland Medical School Alumni Association. For his generous service to the community and his fellow man, Dr. Scully received numerous awards and recognitions, including the Sagamore of the Wabash Award from the Governor of Indiana, the Blessed Mary Catherine Casper Healthcare Award given to a single physician annually, the American Heart Association's Heart of Gold Award, the Shamrock Award from the Friendly Sons of Aaron, and recognition as Andrean Man of the Year. Among other causes, Dr. Scully served the community as the first co-chairman of the Andrean High School Foundation and on the first board of directors of the Gary Diocese Foundation. Dr. Scully was a longtime member of St. Elizabeth Ann Seton Parish, a member of the University Club and Innsbrook Country Club. A complete sports addict, he intensely followed IU basketball, Notre Dame football, and most importantly, the Andrean 59ers.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
That was beautiful. That was absolutely, that. Now you would think that it would be it, but no, there's more.
Oh.
There is more to the story, and for that reason, we've invited Susan and Joan to be with us today, and we're going to take step-by-step stages of this story and tell them. So, welcome, Susan, and go ahead and.
I just wanted to thank you so much. This is such a tribute to my father, and my family is so appreciative of it. Thank you for having us.
I tell you, I'm honored to do it. I absolutely honored. You know the story behind the Moran
Yes.
family and the Scullys. It just is. A lot of us would not be here. I sent you a picture of our kids. That picture literally would have had two people in it had it not been for Dr. Scully. So thank you for being here.
Well, it means a lot to me, and it means a lot to my family. And I know my dad is watching over. Thank you.
Yeah, and he's probably talking to my dad.
Yes.
Oh, that kid.
About politics.
Yeah,
They're talking about the world, the state of politics.
Oh gosh, yes. And boy, to be up there to listen to that one, yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing about that when I get up there. It'll be like stereo politics. So that, yeah, I know both our fathers were passionate about the community, and you know, my dad grew up through Gary, was active in the Gary community, and he actually served on the town board of Maryville. And, you know, but we knew Dr. Scully way back when we were in Gary, and he was our family physician for that. So let's start with the beginning, where John grew up and where he went to school and so on.
Well, my dad was born in 1924, and he was born to John, who went by the name of Jack, and Laura Scully. And his father worked as an accountant at U.S. Steel. His mother was a devoted wife and mother. My dad had two sisters, Betty Martin and Madeline Cowgill. They were both older than him. My dad went to Holy Angels High School and then went to Horseman High School, where he played basketball and ran track. And much to his dismay, his older sister Betty was teaching at Horseman High School when my dad was there, and she just happened to be teaching drama. So my dad had the lead in a play and had never sang a song since then.
Is that by popular request?
It was by popular request. Occasionally at church he would sing just to get a rise out of us, but it was by popular request.
Well, we could tell his passion was elsewhere, sports, and eventually.
His passion was elsewhere, and I think with the exception of my niece Caroline, the rest of the family inherited the tone deafness.
Because of his singing, no doubt.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've been told, I've been tempted to sing here, but Kelly said she'll pull the microphone cord out if I attempt to sing.
Yes,
I
will
don't
not
know
break
why.
into song.
So, well, and so that as we move on to there, so then he graduates from Horseman, which was the, I guess the people who are from Porter County are not familiar with the Horseman district. It was the district that really, it was the upper middle class district of Gary at that time.
It
And,
was.
a lot of the homes, which is still beautiful today, the homes in the Horseman area, it rivals Valparaiso in a lot of ways. The school is, oh my gosh, it's devastating to look at the old high school, but the homes, and they have curved streets and almost like modern architecture in a way. But that was built up to be for the executives at U.S. Steel, the executives from other companies, and actually, from what I understand from someone, there was a large Jewish population in that area, in the Horseman area. So I know Kelly's kind of interested in that since that's her faith. Take us from there. After high school, what did he do?
So after high school, my father went on to Indiana University, where he was going to major in accounting. And he joined Sigma Alpha Epsilon SAE fraternity, which he loved dearly, and was so upset when their chapter at IU was revoked for, I think it was for drinking or something, don't quote me on it, but I know that their chapter was revoked, and he was quite upset about that, but he was an SAE to the end. He left IU early to join the Army, and he enlisted in May of 1943 and went into the officers training program and completed it in Carlisle Barracks, Pennsylvania in July of 1945. And this is where I think he developed his love for medicine, because he then served as second lieutenant at the Station Hospital Camp in Kilmer, New Jersey, until August of 1946. Following that, he went to the Citadel to finish his undergraduate education, and then on the GI Bill went to University of Maryland Medical School. And I really think it was through the Army that he developed this love of medicine. That is where he found his passion.
Thank goodness he did.
Thank goodness. I could never see my father as an accountant, especially going back and looking at some of the records he kept.
Although I'll be honest with you, in fact, our picture of him, by the way, is on our live stream, one of the
Yes.
pictures. So, but I think of him for some reason. When I saw him, I thought of an accountant, but, it's that whole category, doctors and accountants rolled up together. So, yes, thank goodness. And from there, we are going to have to take a brief break, a station
Okay.
break, and then we'll come back and continue. So we will see you back here in just roughly a minute.
Thank you.
You are listening to The Bill Moran Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app. We are broadcasting live from the historic 1 Center Street building in beautiful Valparaiso, Indiana. The Bill Moran Show is underwritten by Recovery Works of Maryville, Indiana. If you or a loved one are struggling with a drug or alcohol problem, please call us at 866-535-4673. Now, back to your host, Bill Moran.
Welcome back. And so we are at the point where he just finished college or got his degree in medicine. And so where did he go from there? Where did he intern?
Okay, so from University of Maryland, he went to Youngstown, Ohio, and did his residency at the Youngstown Hospital Association. and he chose to do internal medicine. And actually, he ended up being chief resident at Youngstown Hospital. And it was there at Youngstown Hospital, and I know it was mentioned before, that he called upon my mother during the middle of the night to do stat lab tests. And I think it was hate at first sight. But they say love and hate are so closely related that it soon became love at first sight. They ended up going to a party and discussing sports. And he, I think, was amazed at her knowledge of the Yankees. My mom was a huge Yankees fan. My dad was an Indians fan. So they made a bet about the World Series, or the pennant. And as it ended up, the Yankees won. My dad, being ever the gentleman, asked my mom out to dinner, and the rest was history. They got engaged shortly thereafter, and then they got married while he was still doing his residency. My dad and mom told me the story of them living in a little cramped apartment. My mom, trying to be the best wife possible, made a cake for my dad every single day. Pretty soon my dad told me that in their cramped apartment, there was no room for anything because there were 10 cakes in this apartment. He gently told her that he thought she had baked enough cakes. To this day, my mom still does not bake.
One thing I do want to rewind a bit here and get Joan to talk about this one period of time when before you met, and this physician was calling stat, which required you to respond immediately. Do you want to tell us your opinion about that the physician that was so demanding back then?
I would be happy to tell you about that. Thank you. I worked at Youngstown City Hospital also, at the North Unit, and there was a South Unit of Youngstown City Hospital, and John matriculated through both hospitals. I was at North Side generally, was transferred to South Side later on. It was about 2 o'clock one morning, and I was on call, and when we technicians were on call, it was from 4:30 Friday afternoon until you finished work at 4:30 Monday afternoon. So it was a long siege. And I had heard of Dr. Scully. I've heard his name, and I had seen him, never had met him. He wanted stat electrolytes done, and he wanted the CO2 immediately. I called him and said, Dr. Scully, there's no such thing as a stat CO2. We use the old Van Slyke method, which is long gone now with the computers and everything else. It will take me until next afternoon to get it done. And he said, well, I can't wait that long. And I said, well, then you come up and do it. And after I said that, I thought, you know, that's pretty nasty to say to an intern, you won't have a job tomorrow. So tomorrow, I was still on call, but then Monday rolled around, and I went into Dr. Rappaport's office. He was the chief pathologist at the hospital, and told him about my orders and about Dr. Scully probably going to talk to him about having me fired. And he said, don't worry about a thing. You know I'd never fire you. And he said, by the way, I wanted to fix you up with him because he's not married, and I think you two would be great together. And I said, I don't even want to meet him. Anybody that orders a stat CO2 can't know very much about medicine. So anyhow, that was our first encounter.
Right away, as you're telling that story, I'm thinking, thank goodness there wasn't an HR department back then, because someone would have been in trouble.
Is that not the truth?
Exactly. That's
Either
right.
Dr. Scully would have been a part of that Me Too process, or something would have happened. So thanks for sharing that with us. That's one of the things that he did have a sense of humor, and that comes out periodically. And when we had our long meetings with him at Methodist, and that always came out. And sometimes it was kind of a little dark, and sometimes it was comical. He did know how to relieve the pressure in the room, though.
Yeah,
Definitely.
He had a wonderful sense of humor,
Yes,
and used it all of the time, especially on me. We had 4 children in 6 years, and I was rather busy, as you can imagine, and wasn't always in the happiest of moods when he'd get home from work. But he always changed that around. I never saw John angry, really. He would become disgusted with certain things if they weren't done the way they should be, and disgusted with certain players on basketball, baseball, football, you name it. He should have been a sports announcer. But I don't think angry was part of his makeup.
It wasn't.
And that made us all very happy.
One of my memories about him, and we'll go on and share about this, every time I saw him walking down the hall at Methodist to come see my dad, just the relationship he had with the nurses. They literally just came up to him and hugged him, and because at that time I think he was in the other hospitals more. In fact, he was the only reason why he was coming to Methodist at that point in time, because my dad was there. And just the level of respect that they showed each other, for them, for him, and then turn around. He'd have these conversations over here because we're waiting to talk to him, and he was concerned about the nurses, and how is this going, and then I read on, and he was actually on the board there. So then I understood. So as we move along, but we had to bring that out. We'll call back on you to bring out some of the more intimate details about John Scully that we all don't know about. So let's continue on. Let's see, where are we at here? So the hospitals he interned, we covered that. So towards the highlight of his career, what hospitals in the area did he work out of?
Well, he first practiced in Gary, Indiana, and went to Mercy Hospital and Methodist Hospital down there. And actually, during really bad weather, I have 3 siblings, Sharon, John, and Tom. He would take us to the hospital when other people couldn't get in to help feed the patients. So we were introduced to medicine at a very early age, and it was a wonderful experience. Later in his career, he moved to Maryville, and he had an office at Internal Medicine Associates in Broadway, and he practiced mainly at St. Mary Medical Center and Methodist Hospital on Broadway. He was also on staff at St. Anthony Hospital in Crown Point. And you mentioned his relationship with nurses. I cannot tell you the number of nurses that I have met in my nursing career that have told me how much my father has taught them, and just the respect they had for him. He was a wonderful man. He was a wonderful teacher. He inspired me to go into nursing. He taught me about compassion. I can never say enough about my father. And the awards that he got, the award from the governor of the state of Indiana, I think the especially important tribute to him was having the intensive care unit at St. Mary Medical Center named after him. It was named after him in 2000, but then when they reopened the ICU in 2015, they still dedicated it to him. I have worked as a liaison for rehab unit and for hospice, and every time I go into the ICU at St. Mary Medical Center, I stop and look at his picture and I touch it. And it just is a way that I feel connected to him. But I probably got off course, so you can continue.
No, no,
that's
by all
beautiful.
means, and that's one of the things I have
beautiful.
on there. We wanted to talk about, the emotion dealing with that, and first of all, in 2000, having it dedicated, which is a tribute to anyone. For those again who are not familiar with Dr. John Scully, you really missed out on a great, great person. The Heart of Gold by the Heart Association, I think, is appropriate because he had a heart of gold. Literally. And I really, when I'm looking at this logically, I'm thinking back to meeting this woman named Joan that pretty much set him straight on the way he should treat nurses, is the why he had such a good relationship with nurses. You set him straight early on in his career. Is that correct, Joan?
No.
No, but
hate to
I
ruin
jest.
this spell you think I cast about him, but John was always a gentleman. The nurses out in Youngstown, of course, where he practiced before, he was the intern and resident there before any of the children were born. He just had a way of getting things done with a smile. And you might just have been ready to kill him to do all of that laboratory work or all of what he wanted done, but you couldn't say no because he was so nice to everyone. And it was one of the things about him that everybody absolutely loved.
Yeah.
And after our little encounter on the laboratory, I was giving a lecture on serology. We had just developed a confirmatory test for infectious mononucleosis. And I was giving a talk to the interns and residents about this procedure. And I had a question and answer period afterwards. And to make a long story short, talked with Dr. Scully afterwards on this little question he had about infectious mono. And we made a bet on a baseball game. I won. He had to take me out, and the rest is history.
That's right.
That's
Love
great.
it.
That's great. And how long were you married again?
We were married for 60 years.
Oh, Lord bless.
60 years.
Oh, that's
It
amazing.
Didn't seem that long, but
No,
it
that's
was.
that's great.
And it was wonderful, 60 years. And you were correct when you said that people had never heard him raise his voice or be angry. I know this is hard to believe after our first encounter, but that was all me. I was the one that kind of flew off the handle. We didn't argue because there was never anything to argue about with him. He was always right. And I hate to admit that, but it's true.
He definitely had a knack for dealing with people. I will be there, and when he tried to escort us through, and he was dealing with a room full of emotions as well, and knowing that our dad was going to be leaving us, and just the way he told us the way we should be when we went in. I mean, it was, and also I will tell you this from a relative of a patient. Talking about an advocate for your patient, I've never seen better. There was a time when we ran an incident with another physician that misrepresented himself to us, and Dr. Scully got wind of that, and you say you never saw him get upset when we told him about the incident. He got the scowl on his face and leaned over and said, "That's the last you will see of that physician in this hospital." And sure enough, that was it. And we appreciated that. We knew and we took comfort that Dr. Scully was always looking out, just not for us, but I'll tell you something. I'll share something about my stepmom, who is this tiny little 70-pound wet lady. And, again, she was in her 70s and my dad was in his 70s. Because he had ALS, she was there reading daily and didn't miss a day, slept there, a saint. And in fact, Dr. Scully told us that, both my dad and my stepmom became saints immediately. They came right up into the heaven. So, but one thing that happened During the winter, like we have today, slippery sidewalks, my stepmom, bless her heart, fell and broke her arm. Dr. Scully intervened because he knew if they just bandaged up her arm and she would still come in, and she was extremely weak. So what did he do? He put her in the hospital to give her a break. Not that she needed to be, but this woman literally lived at Methodist Hospital, and he knew that she was getting run down. So a broken arm, he put her in the hospital and looked out for her and cared for my dad. That's my memory of him. And I do want to roll in something before we get time escapes us. We have a segment that we were going to talk about stories, and I called out for stories, and oh my gosh, in fact, I'll probably check my phone and have some emails still waiting for me to read. And I want to tell everyone, if I missed your story, I apologize. I'm doing the best I can. When I put the call out, I had no idea what I was going to get. And we have physicians, nurses, family members. I think we got all the kids that, and a granddaughter, which is kind of sweet. So,
and grandson.
And grandson. So
Johnny
yeah,
Herrick, yes.
Yeah. So you're going to have to guide me through and call me out.
I
If
will.
you know I've received one, I'll have to go in my email. So you ready? You want to start?
ready.
And so what I'll do is, at the best I can, and this isn't in any particular order. Let me see. Tom Scully writes, let me see.
And I'll just say Tom Scully is the youngest of the children, and he's a neurosurgeon in Tucson, Arizona.
Right. So he followed in the tradition.
He followed in, yes.
So he writes, I have tons of stories, memories, and endless life lessons learned from him. One that has helped and continues to help me today is hit the ball and don't look back. And actually, I got kind of something out of this. I was and still am a golfer. My dad helped me infinitely with my game. I even played on the golf team at Notre Dame. I recall as a child being upset over shots that I had already hit. He stopped me in the middle of one of my rants and simply said, Tommy, hit the ball and don't look back. Such a simple but sage advice. It crosses over to all the elements of life. One cannot alter or change a shot once struck, nor can one alter an action after it has taken place. In essence, don't dwell on the past, stay in the present moment and move forward. Boy, if that isn't sound advice. That's not only helped my golf, more importantly, it has helped my career as a neurosurgeon. Sure, I need to have analyzed decisions for surgery and medically. However, I cannot dwell on them or they will paralyze me in my ability to continue to move forward. So that is from his son, Tom. And again, I got to apologize because these may not, and I wish it. But so, and again, we have some various different peoples and probably people that have written in, and probably it's good maybe giving a mixture here. So we received a email from Dr. Marcia King, who was a nurse back when she was a nurse with your dad.
She was a chief nursing officer at St. Mary Medical Center.
Oh, great. Okay, let me see where he picked this up. I am currently the Dean of the University of St. Francis in Crown Point. However, I was the critical care clinical nurse specialist and then the chief nursing officer at St. Mary's Medical Center. This is when I got to know Dr. Scully. What I most remember about him was his great love of teaching, practicality nurses, particularly nurses, he had such respect for the nurses at St. Mary's. He worked with them, conversed with them, and was their advocate. Everyone enjoyed when he made the rounds because he was a joyful person to work with. He was also an amazing diagnostician. He loved his patients and could make difficult diagnostics as others couldn't. It was an honor to know him, work with him, and learn from him. It was such a loss that when he retired and then at passing, the medical community lost a legend.
Oh,
That it did.
that's so nice of her.
And so comes an email from Sharon Herrig.
That's my older sister, and she's a pulmonologist in the area.
And was there not a Dr. Herrig? I mean, before, if I remember that name in Maryville for some reason.
Well, she practices in Maryville.
Oh, maybe that was
Yes,
her.
that's
Okay,
her.
all right. Again here. I am John's oldest child. I also am a physician and happen to be the medical director of the John T. Scully ICU.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tribute. He was the finest physician I have ever known. However, my fondest memories of him were as a grandfather. I have 3 children. My father attended the numerous football, baseball, basketball, soccer, volleyball, and track events over a 20-year span. He had played baseball for many years, so he was incredibly knowledgeable about those games. I think he was happy when my children did not pursue soccer, but did because an avid volleyball player fan in indoor games. My children always looked for Papa in the stands. He was their biggest cheerleader.
It's beautiful.
I'm entering into that era. I'm a grandpa now. So, and believe me, boy, when those kids play, I'm there. So amazing. Now comes an email from Robert Martino, and you may have to help me out here because
Dr. Martino was an orthopedic surgeon in the area, and actually the surgery waiting room at St. Mary Medical Center is named after him. He is also a legend, and he was my dad's best friend.
And so Robert starts out, John Scully was the first board-certified internist in the Gary area, which I remember many people saying. John was the first physician I met outside of the group I joined, and we became best friends. He upgraded the medical care in Northwest Indiana, which I've heard many stories about. A lot of physicians owe their beginning of their career to Dr. John. I had a case in where a patient developed a high fever and was near extremities. John was consulted, diagnosed.
Malignant hyperthermia.
Thank you. It is a genetic condition in response to general anesthesia. She had a minor surgery 2 weeks prior with no apparent problem, and was sent home, had a fever without care. John treated her, and she recovered. He was a huge diagnostic acumen. So that was from Robert Martino, Dr. Robert Martino. Now we have an email from, this is from John Scully.
And John is my older brother, and he is an attorney, and he actually does medical malpractice defense work, which my dad was very happy about.
Interesting. Was he the only one that didn't pursue a medical career?
Yeah.
Yes.
The black sheep of the family?
He's still a good guy.
I'm saying that because he's a lawyer. You got to understand, I'm trying to make light of the fact that he's a lawyer. But
Yeah.
I will move on before I get myself in any even deeper trouble here. Thank you for the show and doing a show concerning my dad. He was the finest gentleman I had ever known. He was an incredibly smart, decent, caring, wise, witty, and funny. If I had to pick just one word to describe him, though, it would be selfless. He cared about others, not himself, and certainly not things. For my sisters, my brother, and myself, he was the best father anyone could hope for. Encouraging, inspiring, supportive, guiding, and caring. He was kind, decent, and loving, but also brave, courageous, and tough. He truly typified what he, excuse me, what he honored as the greatest generation. I ran across an interesting book in my parents' home several years ago. It's a history of St. Mary's Medical Center written by Jane Bomberger. Bomberger.
Yes.
He is, here is some of what is recorded in that book about my dad. I owe my life and that of my daughter to Dr. Scully. I have soared and accomplished much because of Dr. Scully's patience, care, guidance, and teaching. I would be nothing without him. And the next quote, a doctor's doctor, a true gentleman, a precise and brilliant diagnostician, excuse me for mispronouncing that. My dad is quoted in the book. No one has a greater love affair with medicine than myself, and no one has ever been happier in the field than I was for all the many years that I practiced. Thank you, John. Now this one is kind of sweet. From Sarah Scully. This is a grandchild, right?
And that's actually John's daughter.
Okay, so, all right. My grandfather was a superior doctor, a vital pillar to his community, and an avid sports fan. Whenever I visited up until a few weeks before his death, he gathered to watch whatever game was on TV. On nights when I stayed with him and Grandma Joni, I'd browse through his library only to find an extensive collection of medical journals and textbooks. Despite his devotion to his craft and to football, I knew him mainly as the guy who would fly down to Dallas to watch my ballet recitals. Yes, that is a true grandparent, is it not? They must have been brutally boring for him. At the age of 12, how good could that be? But he sat through so many of them and gave me a huge hug afterwards. Just about couldn't be another example of how incredibly selfless and wonderful he was. I miss him all the time.
And I think you have one from Johnny Herrick on your phone.
Yep.
And then I would also like to say something too.
Go right ahead.
After you're done with
okay.
Johnny.
This is from John Herrick. Let's see here. And again, I briefly go over the salutations here.
That's Sharon's son.
Sharon's.
And he's a lawyer too.
Really?
In Chicago.
Smiling.
He does healthcare law.
We only have doctors of Indian chief.
No Indian chiefs.
He didn't spend enough time with this part of the family?
I guess not.
I jest. I have some of my closest friends are lawyers, and I kid them all the time as they tell me, listen, Bill, it only took us 2 years of school and then have to pass this simple test to do what we do. So really, we're not remarkably smart, and I carry that in my memory. So now that I offended just about every lawyer around, so Dr. Scully is terrific. I have countless stories about the best man I've ever known, but I will leave the below for you as I think it is the prime example of both his humor and great life lesson. My brother and I both had the flu around Christmas time one year where we were visiting family in Tucson. My grandparents were visiting as well. As my brother and I were lying feeling horrible from the flu, my grandpa thought it was a good opportunity to confer some wisdom. He casually explained that we were feeling that what we were feeling was similar, as what a heroin addict's on withdrawals. Interesting. Feel so if we were ever want to feel like this again, never doing heroin would be a good place to start.
Awesome.
I have to remind you, I remember this very dark humor. You see, and he's
It
jovial, but there's like a pin sight of dark humor that he had.
That was my dad's humor.
Yeah.
I will go along with that 100%.
And he ends by saying it was the best anti-drug speech I've ever heard. So, and I think that's it. That's it. You know, I've got to, let me look to make sure. I think we covered them. And, you know, by all means, if anyone wants to share another story.
I would like to say something.
Go right ahead.
I again cannot thank you enough for doing this tribute to my father. He passed away November 19th in 2013, and I miss him so much every day of my life. And what I'd like to read right now is what I gave as my eulogy to him. My dad was healthy every day of his life until he developed cancer towards the end of his life. And his wish was to pass away at home. And through the help of everyone in my family, my mom, my siblings, my nieces and nephews, home health, we made that happen, including my dog Gatsby. I had to get a little plug in for him. My dad stayed at home. This is what I'd like to say about my dad. My father, he was perfect, loving, intelligent, ethical, hardworking, a mentor, a sports enthusiast, go Hoosiers, compassionate and courageous. I would like to touch upon his compassion and courage at this time. If someone were to look up the word compassionate in the dictionary, it would be a description of my father. Benevolent, charitable, merciful, understanding, big-hearted, kind, and giving. My father taught me about compassion through the way he cared for his family and the way he cared for his patients. My dad absolutely loved medicine and helping people. It was because of him that I became a nurse. He taught me through words and his actions what it means to be compassionate, and that's something for which I will always be thankful. I knew my dad had to be courageous as he lived through the Great Depression and volunteered for the Army during World War II. But I personally witnessed my dad's amazing courage over the last few months of his life. He showed enormous strength and willpower and never once complained or felt sorry for himself. To the contrary, his only concern was that he not be a burden to the family. Dad, nothing could be farther from the truth, and I would give anything to have you back. He had a deep love for his children and grandchildren, and the love shared by my parents. Never were two people so perfectly matched. They were a team. Devoted to each other for over 60 years, they have been an example to us all. I have seen firsthand the depth of their love and commitment to each other. This has been a devastating loss, my dad's death for my mother. And my sister-in-law, Dawn, told me when I was taking care of my father that I should feel good in helping to give my dad such an enormous gift in keeping him at home. But I will tell you, Bill, and I will tell everyone who is listening, my dad, even in his final days, gave me the greatest gift at all, because he gave me the gift of knowing what it is to be loved and the gift of compassion. And I cannot thank you enough. Thank you.
Thank you. We can only pray that he was with us. something, after, of course, with his career, after my dad's passing, he went his way, and we never really saw him again. Of course, you would understand that, because if you look at his career, I mean, he was taking care of people all over Northwest Indiana. And not only that, but I've talked to physicians that constantly told me about how they consulted with him. John Scully is the person they called when they couldn't figure something out. What of a tribute is that to a man? To be looked up as a person that you used as a reference when you couldn't figure something out. And then to also, set a standard for physicians in the area. Compassion, knowledge, being careful with the people you work for, and understanding, and you're working as a team. And I think he took that analogy and from sports into practicing medicine. It's a team effort. Nurses, doctors, to the custodian. You hit it right on the head. I always saw him, even the person coming in to do the brief checks on my dad's IV, to the person in respiratory. And if he was in the room, he'd always check and talk with them and ask them how things were going. It's just an amazing, amazing tribute to physicians all over. Joan, Susan, I can't tell you how blessed I am to do this. It's really means a lot to my family. I know my family's watching. I wish I could put my grandkids' pictures up right now. It's literally, they would not be here because their grandfather would not have been here. So what tribute is that? And I can tell you, I've got, look at my Facebook page, it's on my cover. I have two of the most beautiful daughters on the face of the earth. And they're very intelligent and successful.
And a very handsome son, too.
That wasn't directed at me, was it? But again, I want to thank you. And Joan, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. And sharing your stories about John. And
well, it was an honor. I would do anything.
It happened. Go ahead.
To let people know about John, the person, John, the husband, John, the father, was no different than John, the doctor. He treated everybody in a wonderful, sensible, loving, caring way. And our marriage of 60 years was just absolute heaven. We didn't argue except about sports.
Unfortunately, we are going to have to
Yes.
turn it over because my host here is going to get on my
Thank
case.
you
but,
so.
Thank you
so very
And
much.
we are going to take a short transition here, but we would like to thank our guests today. And again, I mean this, I have the greatest respect for Dr. John Scully and will continue till my dying days, because he gave me life, and he gave my mother life, and cared for my father and at the worst point of his life. So thank you again.
We cannot thank you enough.
And this
Thank you.
And this will be up on our YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then also we're going to have the audio file for those who want to podcast it. Now I'll get all that information out as soon as we can. So with that, we're going to do a little transition here, and if
you
you could
so
stick
much.
around for just a bit,
Okay.
then I just need to get the transition music happening here. Just a second, please.
You have been listening to The Bill Moran Show on WVLP LP 103.1 FM and streaming live at WVLP.org or on your TuneIn app.
Welcome to the Bill Moran Show. This is kind of a new thing for us. They're going to do only a YouTube show this time, no WVLP. Doesn't mean we're not going to be on WVLP again. We're still there. What we thought we would try something different, mainly because I wanted to talk about the Crime in the Shadows panel that we just got done taping and broadcasting on WVLP. Kelly was there with me when we had this panel discussion with Breanne Coleman, who actually did a great job moderating.
Yes,
that. She did a wonderful job. And I can't tell you how emotional it was to listen to these poor ladies talk about what they've gone through. And, I've gone through some pretty violent times as a kid, being brought up in Gary and witnessing drug wars and crime, gang wars right outside our front door. But to listen to these poor ladies describe so vividly what they went through just impacted me. I say it was going to be a meaningful, long impact on what I heard. And if you haven't done so, it was broadcast on WVLP at 11 o'clock today, but it is also on our YouTube channel. So, Kelly, I don't know if you want to talk about that. You were there along with it. Unfortunately, we didn't get to any of your part of the story, but hopefully that will be in one of our upcoming segments.
Absolutely.
But just to listen to those ladies talk about the absolute violent nature that they went through and the fear of their lives just was heartbreaking.
As somebody who's gone through rape at the hands of strangers, I can't even imagine going through that type of thing with somebody who you love that proposes to love you, and that was just horrific to hear their stories and to see what they went through and what their children had to witness in all of that.
Welcome to the Recovery Radio with Megan Johnson. I'm Bill Moran, and I'm going to turn it over to Megan, and so we're beginning our transition.
Yes.
Megan?
This is Recovery Radio. Addiction and substance abuse continue to plague our communities, families, and our nation, but we must have hope. Here on Recovery Radio, you will hear about substance abuse, addiction, recovery, and many other related topics from professionals, community members, organizations, and more. We feel that it is so important to continue talking about educating and spreading awareness about not only the problems of addiction, but also the solutions that exist. We would love to have your feedback as you listen to this. If you have ideas or questions or comments or even criticisms, please contact us. You can connect with us. Go to our Facebook page. It's just Recovery Connection. Leave us a message. Feel free to call, or you can go to our website, recoveryconnectionpc.org, and there's a contact form. We would love to hear from you. So today's guest is Todd Willis. Todd is the Director of Prevention and Education at Porter Stark. Hello, Todd.
Hi, Megan. How's it going?
It's good. If anyone has listened to All Rise before, Todd has been on that show previously, and we decided to have him on. Todd is a wealth of knowledge. If anyone knows Todd, he can talk about anything and everything and deliver it in the most amazing way I've ever seen. So I'm excited to talk about what we're going to talk about today. And we had Todd was like, "What do you want to talk about on the show, next week?" And I'm like, "Well, we have a lot to choose from because of all of the topics that you are so knowledgeable in." But we decided on prevention. Todd is obviously the Director of Prevention and Education at Porter Stark, so he knows a lot about prevention. And so let's get into it. Todd, I should just mention this. Todd has to leave around 12:45, 12:50-ish. So obviously you're a busy person. So
thanks for being flexible with me.
I
just really wanted to make an opportunity to come and talk with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. So you were able to present, you do a lot of presentations, but you were able to present the other night. Where were you at?
So there was a presentation a couple nights ago called Shattering the Myth, or Shattering Myths. It was put on by PATH, which is for those of you that don't know, an organization in our community, Positive Approaches to Teen Health. And really what they're all about is education. And so they put on a presentation looking at, they invited Chuck Harris, who is our coroner, and not just our coroner, but like that guy is very invested in educating people on, what's happening with drug addiction. And so the focus was on myths about drug addiction and what's happening in our community. And then I got to get on and talk about prevention. And there's some big time myths about what actually works in trying to prevent people from developing addiction. So I got to talk about that. And there was also an individual that shared their personal story, Ariana. And again, very moving.
Cool.
But it was a good event. Yeah.
Cool. So before we kind of get into what you presented about the other night, what are some of the basics that we should kind of know about prevention? What are the basic kind of things? Why is it important? What does it entail?
So when I start talking about prevention with people, I'm amazed because some of the feedback that I get is, now Todd, are you really sure that you can prevent mental illness? Are you really sure that you can prevent this drug addiction? And that shocks me because, the research is really clear that if you do it a certain way and involve some key pieces, you can prevent this stuff. You don't have to live with these pieces. And if you're worried about these pieces affecting your family, as all of us should, I mean, it's a national problem as we look at drug addiction. Like, there's some things that really clearly address this. So, like, the first point is that, like, prevention works. It's not super exciting to talk about. People don't want to spend time talking about prevention, but you can prevent this stuff. The other thing I want to say around that is the key pieces is that, so like I'm a big treatment guy. I work for Porter Stark. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, licensed clinical addiction counselor. You cannot treat your way out of this problem. We in the treatment world are struggling because treatment works for some and doesn't work for others. We're also really working hard to get qualified people to provide that treatment.
Really?
And then, there's aspects that we can provide, and there's other aspects, we've been trying to look at what needs to happen for a detox center in this area for a long time. And so treatment is not always available to people. And so where I come in and what I'm passionate about is like, okay, since we're not going to arrest our way out of this problem, we can't treat our way out of this problem, we have to start looking at finding out, can we stop it before it gets started?
Sure.
So
it doesn't always have to be like post cleanup or
right. Absolutely. I mean, treatment is all about after you're in trying to recover and get your life back. And so that's a needed area. This area of prevention. The other thing that is also true in the research is it's cheaper. So for every dollar we spend on a prevention model or prevention ideas or initiatives, we save $10 in treatment.
Wow.
And so $1 goes to prevention, we save another 10. I'm not trying to put Porter Stark out of business, but wouldn't it be great if we didn't need treatment centers anymore?
Right.
Because we could really get active. And I believe that day is possible where we can prevent or greatly reduce some of this stuff. So right off the bat, those are the two key elements that I like to talk about. What I shared when we did our presentation in the community was just there are some elements that research time and time again has said, look, if you're going to do prevention and you're going to make it work for people, these key elements need to be there. And so maybe we could spend a little time. Definitely. I don't want to bore your listeners with the research, but just from an idea perspective, there are some key elements you got to have.
I would love to hear.
Okay.
And I think that, I think this is so important. If anyone has any interest in substance abuse, if you know someone who struggles with substance abuse, if you have kids and hope that one day they won't, these things are so important to know. And like you said, I mean, prevention is not necessarily talked about as much. We talk so really much about treatment, and I talk my butt off about recovery.
Well,
but,
and there's another area that really just doesn't get its time.
Right,
and so, when we're talking about a treatment, I want to be clear, in terms of what I'm saying. there are a lot of good people in our community that are working really hard to address this problem. And a lot of our efforts are focused on what I want to call awareness, okay? And so that's the idea that, like, hey, we need to tell people there's a problem, tell them how bad it is, tell them what could happen with drugs, look at folks that, courageous individuals that have really brought themselves out of the horrors of addiction and are surviving and thriving. That's awareness. And I think as a community, we do a pretty good job of awareness. I don't think there are many people running around anymore that don't know there's a drug problem.
Yeah.
I think the people that say there's no drug problem really are the folks that are in denial, and that's not an education issue, right? But one of the things I'm concerned with is we think awareness is prevention. That if we talk about this problem enough, and that if we tell the horrors of addiction, and anybody that has gone through that, like the horrors of addiction, that doesn't even quite, the words don't match that.
Yeah.
People think, our community sometimes struggles with that we think that is prevention.
Sure.
That somehow is going to prevent people from using substances. And when I look at the research, there is some findings that with some people, if they hear a terrible enough story, it'll catch some kids.
Okay.
The bulk of kids, adults, people in the community, it's not registering with. Because, I mean, you know this. You are in this field. There's the not me philosophy.
Yeah.
That if I tell you my horrible story, I may be shocked. Some people even kind of view it as, unfortunately, entertainment, and that's not what the person's sharing it with.
Definitely.
But they'll, at the end of that, sometimes, especially in the issue of addiction and recovery, there's the, wow, Todd, your story was really bad, but that's not me.
Yeah.
That's not going to be me.
Definitely.
And so I think what I would like to try to do with the people that I work with is really push, of course we need awareness.
Yeah.
But to really get an understanding that really doesn't stop people from using drugs.
Okay.
And especially younger people. But yet that's typically where we land.
Okay.
I've done lots of presentations to folks talking about the dangers of drugs.
Sure.
I think they get that, but it's not stopping it.
Sure. So, what will? I mean, I think it is important that people are aware. I think it is important that kids are learning that drugs are bad, but that can't be our only tactic for preventing these issues.
Right. And so a lot of this stuff I'm talking about, I hope your listeners are like, well, what does this guy know? Is this is he just talking out of his rear? I hope that, and I can't go over all the research involved, but if you are interested, I know they know how to get a hold of you. I'll give you the research links to all of this.
Okay.
Because it's well documented.
Sure.
One thing, what does work? Well, programs that just don't focus on one drug work. And let me be more specific. We have an opioid problem and a prescription drug problem in Porter County. Not just in Porter County, but nationally. Any prevention ideas that are just focused on that and don't include, wait for it, alcohol, tobacco, the research is clear that it's not going to be effective.
Okay.
And I'm amazed at, we talk about gateway drugs and prevention. And I almost hate that term because it gets everybody gets tired of the gateway term discussion, and everybody thinks about marijuana, which, I mean, marijuana is a gateway drug to a lot of these other harder drugs. Legislation right now is making it difficult for us to talk about marijuana, right?
Definitely.
But where we don't really spend a lot of time is on alcohol. I mean, if you wonder if we have an issue with alcohol in our community, even what people call responsible drinking, go on to any of our county, city websites and see how many events are structured around alcohol.
Absolutely.
Well, you may be like, well, Todd, that's adults. You're supposed to be talking about prevention. It sets the stage. It sets the stage for how our community, how people view alcohol is not really a drug at all.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of those harder substances we're trying to prevent, I know very few people that struggle with heroin that did not get started either with, there's that gateway term, but
Yeah.
alcohol is sometimes tied to that.
Absolutely.
So one key principle that we've got to look at for a prevention program that works is it's got to cover all drugs, legal drugs and illegal drugs.
Okay.
Another key area that I find is pretty interesting is the research is pretty clear about family-based interventions. That if you're going to have a program that works, it can't just be, hey, Todd, will you talk to middle school kids about drugs? There has to be some kind of family component.
That's interesting. Do you see us doing that in Porter County, kind of taking the family approach versus just educating
I
the
think
kids?
people and schools are really wanting to. I'm working with a lot of forward-thinking schools that are like, hey, we want this presentation for this particular grade, but we want to try to engage families. The trick is nobody's quite certain how, and I'm not
Gotcha.
saying I have the answers to that.
Sure.
But depending on your community, some communities really, parents in particular, still want to, we all do. This is scary stuff, and sometimes we keep our heads in the sand about it. And so it's trying to get those parents involved from an education standpoint. And then if they think Johnny has a problem,
Sure.
what can we do with those families around helping them bond? I mean, gosh, I'll have to come back. The research is so clear on why people start typically using and abusing drugs. And one of the red flags that keep coming up, not to blame parents. I'm a parent, and I don't want anybody blaming me. But you have things like family bonding, your relationships,
Sure.
learning to have discussions about these substances, and making sure your kids are clear, and not only with what you say but what you do. Get a clear message about how you feel about substances in general, and they're using substances. And so the research all over the place is like, hey, if you don't get families involved, it's not going to be effective. And that's a struggle.
Interesting. Yeah, I bet.
I do have one question here. When you bring up families, and that's something I've witnessed as we progress in generations and so on, we've seen a disconnect in families, if you
Sure.
will. People are stressed. You kids are involved in more activities, and are you seeing that as a correlation that as we are stressed out as family units, that the disconnect between the mentoring process of the parents and the children? Are you seeing a direct correlation between usage?
Absolutely. And I'm not even coming from a religious or political standpoint when I say this, but the family is incredibly important to mental health and addiction. I can't say it in any stronger way. And that when you have trauma to the family, or you have issues in the conflict that doesn't get resolved, it comes out in lots of different ways. And so, as we continue to progress in all the cool things that we have, like technology and all that stuff, and as our lives are supposed to be getting easier, we really find that the family unit in general is starting to have cracks in it, is starting to dissolve. One really awesome program that is still functioning, that when I first heard about it, I was like, what? Was this Around the Table that Empower Porter County is doing, or was doing. And they brought me in. They're like, hey, Todd, would you be interested in meeting with families, doing a little education as we call them into the school and basically teach them to eat around the table with their family? And when I heard that, I was like, what? And I'm a drug prevention guy. Like, what does that have to do with? And then I looked at their research. It is painfully clear
It is.
that families that, on an average, eat around the table, not with electric devices or telephones or those kind of things, but have dinner around the table, decrease aggression, school problems, and substance abuse by over half.
Wow.
Simply just having family meals together.
Yeah.
And to answer your question, Bill, our world has kind of minimized the time around the table. We've got activities, and we've got
Definitely.
multiple parents working because you need that to survive, right?
And also, you set an example. You talked about the use of alcohol, persistent, and you know, I guess you know, when children see their parents consume alcohol, again, they believe it is an okay thing to do. And you know, now we have advertisements. I
Of
mean,
course
look at
we- yeah.
the sponsorships and so on, and the kids see their parent drinking alcohol, and then you add that to the family disconnect that we're looking at, because people are becoming busy. They're busier at their work, and actually, our society, if you remember back in the 80s and 90s, the Japanese were going through a lot of health issues because they were working close to 18-hour days. So you add the disconnect that you parent, and the parents are drinking more. They are. Then you have the disconnect time with the kids. It just seems like a perfect storm.
Right.
Absolutely.
I don't want to come across like I'm saying that if you drink, you're a horrible person or alcohol's bad. All that I'm saying is the message is getting a little bit distorted. Alcohol was and always will be a drug. And what we're seeing is it's being normalized in lots of different settings. That is having an impact on preventing substance use in our county.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So some other interesting things is that the research talks about in regards to what works from a prevention standpoint is to kind of let go of some of those things that we used to think work but really have shown through research don't.
What kinds of things?
Well, and this is this is good, again, good people and great agencies doing all they can to try to tackle this problem. For instance, you know, there's significant research on a well-loved program called the DARE program. And what we're finding is research continues to go out, is that it's not as effective as what we thought it was. When we think about Red Ribbon Week, you know, I don't want to. Red Ribbon Week is an amazing. It was created because of a law enforcement individual that died as a result of the drug war. Courageous individual. And again, is an awareness campaign, and those aren't bad.
Yeah, sure.
But when we start to go, okay, we're preventing substance abuse by having kids wear red ribbons, that some of them wear them proudly and are like, hey, this is meaningful to me. And some of them, I mean, you can talk to the kids to find out exactly how meaningful some of this stuff is to them.
Sure.
And so we've got to keep challenging ourselves, pushing ourselves as a community to like, what is out there that really research-wise, evidence-based, shows works? And so we talked a little bit about that Monday night.
Okay. So what are, I mean, you mentioned around the table, what are some other programs out there? What are some other things being done in different communities that have been proven to be effective at preventing mental health issues and substance abuse issues?
Right. So there needs to be continued components that we add, because we're doing a lot of stuff that not by itself, but if it were combined with other things, like the schools doing rallies and presentations around drug awareness is fabulous. It's great.
Sure.
But if we're missing the around the table component, or the let's find a way to market and get our families in and have some round table discussions, would be valuable. There's some really great evidence for a program called Life Skills, which we have presented in Valpo and have rolled out in Stark County. That really is it's not your typical, hey, drugs are bad, they'll kill you kind of presentation, because that's not landing with people, particularly kids. Kids know that, hey, the reason people use drugs is because they make you feel good for a time period.
Definitely.
They're not connecting with what happens to you once you get hooked.
Sure.
So the message of drugs are bad, don't do drugs, say no, that hasn't really been too effective. And so this life skills program is about going into schools, targeting transition points. So we don't just target, oh, these are our bad kids, you know, these are the ones we think will use substances. We look at, when do people go through these major life transitions? and we need to hit them with this life skills program. When are those transitions? Well, you can guess. What was it like for you when you went from 5th grade to 6th grade? What was it like for you when you went from 8th grade to 9th grade? And the life skills program, yes, it talks about drug resistant skills, but it looks at what the research has said why people use drugs, like things like developing skills around self-control, emotional awareness, communication, social skill, problem-solving pieces, academic. You're like, Todd, those have nothing to do with stopping using drugs. But the research is clear that those are the reasons why people use to begin with.
Gotcha.
And so the life skills, teaching them how to navigate their peer relationships, teaching them study habits and how to get academic support. I know this doesn't like excite people, but like the research is clear that if we can get people to do those things, kids to do those things, they will be less likely to turn to these other areas. So the life skill program is all about that.
Okay.
And when we implemented that, we found tremendous support from the kids themselves. What we did when we implemented this several years ago in Valpo was we took a 6th grade class and followed them, did the 6th grade programming, followed them into 7th grade, did the 7th grade programming, followed them into 8th grade, did the 8th grade programming. Measured them in terms of their attitudes toward using substances in 6th grade, hit them at the end in 8th grade. The research that we did and the data were very clear that not only did they have a positive experience around learning how to navigate this complex issue of addiction, they felt more equipped, and their overall comfort level with drugs in general decreased, meaning they didn't want to expose themselves to those things.
Sure.
And so we've gotten some run out of those types of programs.
Wow, that's awesome. And so you were just touching on them, but can you talk about like protective factors versus risk factors? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because, and part of what I hope to do with the brief time that we're talking is just to equip your listener so that when in our community or in the schools, people are talking about, hey, we're going to do this prevention program, that now you have a framework to like for your own self to go, oh, you know, this guy said that it needs to probably focus on these things. I wonder if this does. Any good program with prevention needs to focus on what's called protective factors. There are some factors that research is clear that help people resist drugs, like their ability to be assertive, their ability to communicate, having a strong support system that doesn't use drugs, family bonding and relationships, lack of trauma or the ability to be resilient from trauma. Those are all protective factors. And so any good program is going to target those and say, oh, these are all Megan's protective factors. I got to help her get those higher. And then it's going to look at, what do we know about risk? Who's at risk from the research using drugs? Well, kind of the opposite of what I just told you is that folks that have gone through trauma, significant repeated trauma, are more likely to use. Folks that have a lot of family conflict, that don't feel like they can communicate well in their family, are more likely to use. And so we'll target those risk factors and give you skills to manage that. That's the whole idea with prevention.
Cool. So I know you have to leave here in a few minutes. What?
And I have to apologize. We're partially responsible for shortness on
Hey,
time.
that's
We had some
okay.
technical problems.
If
with,
you would have just given me 2 minutes, I would have taken 2 minutes.
I
Look,
feel
I mean,
bad.
the reality is people are dying in our community, and there's lots of good people that are working hard. So I appreciate
Definitely.
any time you give me.
Absolutely. So just to kind of summarize, you know, there are ways of prevention that you know we have thought have worked in the past, but it's not necessarily true that these things do work. Why do you think it's so hard for people to change their ways? You know, even when research is saying, no, this is not working, but this way does work. Why do you think the shift hasn't necessarily happened yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think on one end, it's people want to do something. And prevention is hard, as we just talked about. It requires lots of levels. It requires going across multiple settings like schools, clubs, the faith-based community. Okay, I could go on another couple hours about the faith-based community and the fact that, what are we doing with prevention with those folks? There are people going to church that have cried out to God, cried at the altar, take this away from me. And sometimes that happens and sometimes that doesn't, and then they feel it's them.
Yeah,
right? Which isn't the case. So why do folks have a hard time maybe letting that go? I know I've had a hard time letting some of those things go because it makes me feel like I'm doing something when I support, here, wear this red ribbon.
Definitely.
And we want to do something. The other parts to that is maybe just a lack of understanding of the key elements still, because a lot of people don't talk about this prevention piece.
Sure.
We want to feel like we're doing something, and then we have these old tools that we have used.
Sure.
And let's use them again.
Let's use them, yeah, absolutely. So one thing I just kind of heard you say, and this can be like your final kind of closing comments, but prevention as well as treatment as well as recovery is a community effort.
Absolutely.
And I am just seeing over and over and over again that this problem of substance abuse and addiction that is affecting us all is not going to be solved or overcome by one agency, by one individual, that it is going to take an entire community to kind of address it.
Absolutely, and you said that well. It's treatment people being able to work together and not feel like we're competing. It's treatment and recovery, which typically sometimes haven't always spoken the same language, working together. And it's like, hey, those things are great, and everybody's working hard, but what are we doing in the front? And getting some folks that understand prevention at the table. We need everybody. We need everybody. And it's part of the reason why I think nationally we've not been able to get our hands around this. It changes so fast. We're struggling keeping up, so we need you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you for this time.
I think that this time has proven that you should come on again, because
Sure, I'd love
obviously
to.
there's so much more that we could talk about and get into. So stay tuned. Todd will definitely be on again.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so much. So luckily, Todd, before we met about this show today, sent me an article on kind of research about prevention and things like that, and he touched on a lot of these kind of principles that go into what prevention is, what the research says about prevention. So I just want to read through those principles right now, and then Bill, you and I can kind of have a little discussion.
Oh, sure. There's a lot today that I have to discuss.
Absolutely.
A lot.
Okay. Okay. So I'll leave.
No,
some
I just
time
don't
at
take
the
it.
end.
No,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a lot to discuss in general in this problem. It's
Absolutely.
heartbreaking. It's a problem that's breaking the community's heart. It is. We're
Absolutely.
losing people, and it's got to stop.
Absolutely. And there is, clear research, and Todd is one of, I've never met anyone who is so knowledgeable on the research that has been done and the experiments that have been done to prove what will work, if only we could kind of all learn that and start to take those steps. So as far as prevention goes, I'll just read through these principles and then you and I can kind of wrap it up. So principle 1, and Todd did touch on a lot of these things, so this is just kind of a summary. Prevention programs should enhance protective factors and reverse or reduce risk factors. So he was just kind of talking about that, these protective factors that are going to help a person not use or not turn to substances. We want to enhance those things and reduce the risk factors and take care of those things that are affecting us negatively. Principle 2, prevention programs should address all forms of drug abuse, alone or in combination, including the underage use of legal drugs like tobacco or alcohol, the use of illegal drugs like marijuana or heroin, and the inappropriate use of legally obtained substances like inhalants. Prescription medications or over-the-counter drugs as well. Principle 3, prevention programs should address the type of drug abuse problem in the local community, target modifiable risk factors, and strengthen identified protective factors. Principle 4, prevention programs should be tailored to address risks specific to population or audience characteristics such as age, gender, and ethnicity to improve program effectiveness. Principle 5, family-based prevention programs should enhance family bonding and relationship and include parenting skills, practice in developing, discussing, and enforcing family policies on substance abuse, and training in drug education and information. As we talked about before, Around the Table is one of those programs who is doing that so well, getting families to come around the table to talk about feelings and issues and things like that, and also educating families on drug abuse and addiction. Did you have something to say about that?
Are you done? Or?
Well, that's some of the principles,
Okay.
so I'll keep going. Principle 6, prevention programs can be designed to intervene as early as infancy to address risk factors for drug abuse, such as aggressive behavior, poor social skills, and academic difficulties. I did not know that. Prevention can start as early as infancy. Everyone, that's a fun fact. Principle 7, prevention programs for elementary school children should target improving academic and social emotional learning to address risk factors for drug abuse, such as early aggression, academic failure, and school dropout. Education should focus on things like self-control, emotional awareness, communication, social problem solving, and academic support. The next principle, community prevention programs that combine two or more effective programs, such as family-based and school-based programs, can be more effective than a single program alone. Community prevention programs reaching populations in multiple settings, for example, schools, clubs, faith-based organizations, and the media, are most effective when they present consistent community-wide messages in each setting. That kind of touches on the collaboration that needs to happen, you know, all of us working together on the same kinds of things. When communities adapt programs to match their needs, community norms, or differing cultural requirements, they should retain core elements of the original research-based intervention, which include structure, how the program is organized and constructed, content, the information, skills, and strategy of the program, and delivery, how the program is adapted, implemented, and evaluated. Prevention programs should be long-term with repeated interventions to reinforce the original prevention goals. It can't just be a one-time thing. It has to be repeated and with the same goals each time. And prevention programs are most effective when they employ interactive techniques such as peer discussion groups and parent role-playing that allow for active involvement in learning about drug abuse and reinforcing skills. All of these principles are based on research that has been done, research that has been shown to prove that these types of programs work in preventing substance abuse in education. And it's amazing, I think, that these kinds of things are out there and that we're not utilizing them more.
Right. And my take on that is, you know, we've got this problem escalating. What do we deal with any other problem? We listen to the research. We listen to statistics on whether it be our environment, on what is going to be a better educational process for our children, but yet we're faced with a escalating epidemic that we're not listening to the research, and I just don't get that. I don't know if it's because you know, there hasn't been a clear voice. And saying
there's a lot of research out there.
And it's kind of disheartening. I'm reading the news where the president's coalition now is falling apart, and to me that is dangerous. I mean, this is a national epidemic that needs to be looked at beyond politics. Absolutely. It's beyond politics, and we're taking it to a political level, which it can't be. But one of the things that, you know, I was so intrigued at hearing Todd talk about, and I always felt, is the family breakdown. And I think it's Kay for Tasha that's leading the round table. Those are great because it's teaching people how to be a family. Definitely. And, you know, back in the old school days, my time, when you didn't have, you know, we really didn't have a choice. We had to be there for dinner, and we, you know, whether we liked it or not, you know, we sat around the table, but I look back to those, and, you know, I felt connected with my parents, and you know, so some of the things that I think is problematic is they don't have that connection. Kids are allowed to go in and do social media, gaming, you know, and we got to draw back from that and look at where the priority in putting the family together, else we're going to lose family members.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to state is, you know, setting an example in the community. I've stated to several of our elected officials, and that although drug tests are controversial, I do believe if you hold a public office or serve the public in any way, shape, or form, you should be subject to a drug test. That's my personal feeling. Herb Stevenson says this so eloquently. And he says it plainly. You use, I don't work with you, period. And that means anything, alcohol, drug, and you won't represent any of the people that he works with.
Yeah.
So I that sounds harsh and it sounds accusatory, but I think there is justice behind that. And we do have to set an example, and that's where the family unit is supposed to be doing.
Absolutely.
The fathers, the mothers, setting an example for the kids, and you can't do that, if you don't see the kids.
Absolutely.
And so
I think it is so important, for a community who is plagued by these issues to sort of come together and say, what can we do together? What might we have to sacrifice to help these people who are struggling and who are dying? What tactics can we come together on? And what you were talking about politics, politics divides so many people, but at the end of the day, people are dying. People are sick. People are hurting and in pain and are, having diseases. So many things. And if we are letting these things divide us, we're not making any progress. We're not solving any issues. So, how can we come together with this amazing research that's been done and focus on prevention and treatment and recovery as a whole, as a system, and start to work through these things? It would be amazing to see, and that's obviously in an ideal world. But
and some of the disheartening things you read in the newspaper. In fact, I just was talking with someone from the U.S. Attorney's Office recently about a different subject entirely. But now that they're looking at a opioid unit, or just not opiates, a drug enforcement unit.
Sure.
And we all saw the heartbreaking story of this physician, I believe it was in Munster, who was over prescribing opiates. Gosh, it's got to stop. And I know, Dave Reynolds has been on the show many times. And he said, law enforcement isn't where it's at. We've got to get it before it gets that bad.
Yeah,
and as you say, there's statistics out there to show us what's wrong. And we just got to listen to them. And I think that's what's so great about this radio show. It does avoid a platform, and and more we could do that. I think at least people know where to call, where to go.
Definitely.
And one of the things, if you look at Porter County, there are so many resources. You have the Substance Abuse Council, you have Rehab Connection, and you have folks like Todd at Porter Stark. And so there are a lot of resources out there. People got to know where to go. And the more and more, I guess, that we could do that, I feel better that, and we put time in this show that, we let people know. Todd today let people know. And so it's because I'll tell you, it's sometimes you have so many entities working for the same purpose. The message does get clouded sometimes because they get confused, and
there is
and
kind
so
of a disconnect sometimes, and,
Yeah.
and you can't blame people, right?
No,
I mean,
no,
people
no.
are working hard. People
Exactly.
have good intentions, but sometimes it does get a bit disjointed, and so.
That's one of the things. I think as long as we put it out there, these are the numbers, these are the people that are working on that solution.
Definitely.
I think the better position we are going to be in as far as the community. So
Definitely, absolutely.
yeah. And
So let's go ahead and wrap up. I mean, maybe this idea of research and what does the research show, not only in prevention, but in treatment and recovery and in other aspects of this issue. I mean, maybe that's something that we can look into the future. And I know that Todd will be back on definitely. So we want to thank him for being here. Todd Willis is the Director of Prevention and Education at Porter Stark. He's a great person, and we just thank him for being here today. Thank you, Bill, for helping me co-host Recovery Radio. I really appreciate having you. So Recovery Radio is underwritten by Lawn Pro Lawn Care and Pact Incorporated. We are so thankful for your support and allowing us to have this show and do what we do. Recovery Radio is a program of Pact Incorporated. My name is Megan Johnston, and on behalf of WVLP, Pact Incorporated, and our community, we would like to thank you so much for listening. Have a great day, everyone.
Greetings, happy campers, boys and girls, moms and dads, friends and neighbors, buckaroos, buckarettes, buccaneers. Welcome to another edition of Songs from Camp and Superheroes.